Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's get right into it, because today we're looking at something that fundamentally shapes how we see the world, how we read stories, and honestly, how we process information on a daily basis. We are talking about the profound and often completely invisible impact of point of view. Over the next few minutes, we're going to reveal what is essentially a massive illusion. We'll see exactly how the camera angle a writer chooses dictates what we believe to be true.
Okay, let's dive into this. When most of us hear the phrase point of view, we instantly flash back to middle school English class, right? We tend to think of it as this dry, dusty grammatical rule, just the mechanical difference between using the pronoun I or the pronoun they. But we need to completely shatter that assumption right now. Point of view is absolutely not just mechanics. It's a profound, overarching strategy.
You see, point of view is actually a rhetorical choice. And a rhetorical choice is any intentional decision a writer makes to actively influence an audience. Point of view is never, ever neutral. It's a deliberate, highly calculated tool used to control exactly how close you feel to a subject, what specific emotions you experience, and how credible you find the information being presented. It's the writer deciding exactly how they want to shape your intellectual experience.
Section 1. First person, extreme intimacy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference a lens actually makes. Just listen to these two phrases. On one hand, we have, "I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached." On the other, "She sat silently in the classroom while everyone else spoke around her." Feel that visceral shift in the camera angle? The first one is an intimate, super tight close-up, right there inside the car with them. The second is a wide shot taken from across a crowded room. One literally puts you in the driver's seat, the other puts you back in the audience.
Let's break down exactly why writers choose that tight close-up. First person gives us this incredible intimacy because it acts as a direct, unfiltered feed right into the narrator's mind. We get immediate access to their passing thoughts, their highly subjective perceptions, and their deepest emotional reflections. It creates intense emotional immediacy. When we read a lived experience entirely from an I perspective, our empathy kicks in almost automatically because we are effectively living it right alongside them.
But, and this is a big but, that intimacy comes with a pretty heavy cost. While first person pulls us in close, it drastically limits our perspective to only what the narrator sees, remembers, and understands. And obviously, this opens the floodgates to bias, emotional distortion, and flat-out unreliability. We are getting a highly filtered version of reality. Ironically, though, that's exactly why writers love using it, because it perfectly mimics our own real, flawed human experience.
Moving to Section 2. Third person, observational distance.
If first person is that tight, sweaty close-up, third person is taking a massive step backward. Third person offers real distance, creating a much more observational or analytical tone. Because the narrator isn't physically tangled up in the middle of the mess, the writing inherently feels more neutral and objective. It gives the writer incredible flexibility to zoom out, explore larger social dynamics, and analyze multiple people or situations with a much greater sense of narrative distance.
Just briefly, it's worth noting how writers can fine-tune this distance. They might use third-person limited, which closely follows just one character's thoughts, sort of like a drone camera hovering right over their shoulder. Or they can switch to third-person omniscient. That's the God mode camera, where the narrator suddenly knows the hidden thoughts and feelings of every single person in the room. That choice entirely dictates how information flows to you, the reader.
Section 3. Second person, direct involvement.
Listen to how this feels. You walk into the room pretending not to care, even though your heart is racing. By breaking the fourth wall and throwing in the word you, the writer instantly reaches out, grabs you by the collar, and drops you directly inside the experience. You're not just safely reading a story anymore. You suddenly are the story.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the psychological tension it creates. Second person builds incredibly intense emotional involvement. It perfectly simulates frantic thought processes, especially things like anxiety, internal dialogue, or even moments of dissociation. And it thrives on ambiguity. Does you mean literally me, the reader, or does it mean the narrator talking to themselves in a mirror? That lingering ambiguity creates just a brilliant layer of emotional complexity.
Section 4. Identity, time, and reliability.
Now we're getting to the core of it. Point of view is entirely inseparable from identity. It's deeply tied to lived experiences, things like culture, class, gender, and trauma. When a writer chooses a perspective, they are making a deeply powerful rhetorical choice about reality itself.
Point of view determines what experiences get centered. It dictates whose voices hold power and whose voices get pushed to the margins. Simply changing the perspective can radically alter how an audience understands what is real and what actually matters.
Throw time into the mix, and it gets even more fascinating. In personal narratives, you often encounter this layered narration, where a narrator is basically existing in two time periods simultaneously. You've got the past self, who is caught up in the raw, immediate emotion of the event, and then you have the present self, who is looking back at that event with the power of hindsight.
This dynamic is captured so perfectly here. At the time, I thought leaving was freedom. Now I understand what I lost. As the audience, we are experiencing that past action, but our interpretation is being entirely colored and guided by the narrator's current, much wiser perspective. Time itself has become a rhetorical tool.
Let's move on and see how this builds into one of the absolute best tricks in writing, the unreliable narrator. Since we only know what the narrator chooses to tell us, writers can deliberately engineer a narrator who misremembers events, conveniently hides key information, or just completely misunderstands their surroundings. Think about a child narrator completely misinterpreting a serious adult conversation. The reader catches the deeper meaning, but the narrator is oblivious. It creates incredible suspense and reveals so much underlying emotional conflict.
Section 5. Shaping Narrative Reality.
So, the crucial point is this. Writers absolutely do not pick their pronouns by accident. They choose a point of view based entirely on who their audience is and what their ultimate rhetorical purpose is. A memoir, that demands the raw, emotional honesty of the first person. A piece of academic research, that requires the objective, cool credibility of the third person. And a hard-hitting persuasive text might deploy the second person to grab you right by the shirt collar. Point of view is the ultimate Swiss Army knife writers use to persuade, to connect, and to communicate.
I'm going to leave you with a lingering question to chew on. How does the point of view in the media and the stories you consume every single day shape your own personal understanding of reality? Because remember, point of view isn't just a grammar rule you leave behind in middle school. It's controlling intimacy, distance, authority, and emotion. Ultimately, whoever controls the camera angle controls reality itself. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer, and I challenge you to look just a little bit closer at the I's, they's, and you's you run into today. Catch you next time.